We're going to welcome Rebekah Snyder, who is going to be teaching about rooftop nesting birds in the Florida Panhandle. And right now, all library programming is still virtual, but we have some Zoom programs as well as our pre-recorded through our Northwest Regional Library System Florida YouTube channel. And this one will be available for that if you want to share this program at a later time with friends and family. I think the one other program I wanted to highlight before I pass it over to Rebekah is we're doing it's going to be next Tuesday, the 27th at 2 p.m. Central Time, 3 p.m. Eastern for, it's a book club with a local author, Melinda J., and her latest title, Annie Laura's Gift. And it was very enjoyable. And this one, you'll just be able to chat with the author on her newest release. So if you want to join us for that, that is also through Zoom. And all that information is on our website at www.nwrls.com. So that's it for me. I'm going to pass it over to the expert, Rebekah.
Thank you. And thanks everyone for coming. I just want to say thank you to Bay County Library for helping me put all of this together. I'm excited to talk to you about my work and the work that Audubon Florida does for a lot of our sensitive beach nesting birds. So specifically, I'm going to be talking to you about the coastal species that we have nesting on gravel rooftops throughout the Panhandle, how Audubon Florida monitors and protects them, and ways that you can get involved if you would like to. So Audubon Florida and our monitoring program is a statewide monitoring effort. We're partnered with several people throughout the state, several organizations, primarily the Florida Shorebird Alliance. We originally began monitoring rooftops in Florida by local Audubon societies. So St. Petersburg Audubon Society down in the Tampa Bay area, but then also Bay County itself with the Bay County Audubon Society. They were very active early on with rooftop monitoring. And rooftop nesting is documented to have occurred as early as the 1950s. And there is actually even some published literature out on rooftop nesters, specifically in Bay County. But the take-home message that I want you to realize is that these birds have been nesting on rooftops for quite some time. And even though we've only been monitoring them for a few years, we do have a pretty large effort throughout the state, and we couldn't have done it without the combined efforts from different organizations within the community. Birds that nest on rooftops here in Florida are also found nesting all over other states. We have them nesting in Alabama. There are birds that nest in South Carolina. This is an article about American oyster catchers, which are solitary nesters that were found on a rooftop in downtown Charleston. So this is something that is beyond the scope of just occurring here in Florida. It really is a Gulf Coast issue, and then also an Eastern Seaboard issue. Primarily, I'll be talking about coastal birds and beach nesting birds, but it's also important to note that not just coastal species nest on rooftops. There was an article that came out, excuse me, several years ago, which was the real first comprehensive look at all of the different varieties of species in the world that nest on gravel rooftops. And they found actually quite a bit of birds nest on rooftops. At least 22 species were found to nest and use these style of rooftops. So we're going to be talking about just a few, but I want you to realize that this is beyond the scope of Florida, beyond just even the scope of North America and the US, but really something that happens all over the world. The birds that Audubon Florida monitors in particular are what we call our focal species. And these are species that have been of more concern to us and to the state because of their population numbers. So we currently have 6 that we look at for rooftops in general. All 6 of these species are native birds, and they are protected under the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. But then within the state of Florida, some of them have an extra level of protection. So they are either considered state threatened or state endangered. So the top 3 birds here, the American oyster catcher, least tern, and black skimmers. In Florida, these birds are considered state threatened. But then the lower right bird, the roseate tern, This bird is actually considered state endangered, as it only really occurs down in the South Keys of Florida. And then the other two, the gall-billed tern and the killdeer, we keep these on our list for birds to monitor on rooftops because they're the most common birds to see, or one of the most common birds to see on rooftops, but they don't have an extra protective status in the state of Florida. They're just protected under the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. Out of these 6 species, though, the most common that we do see on rooftops are the least terns. It's this bird here in the center. And so that's what I'll primarily be talking about today, since they are the most abundant. Outside of that, though, would be killdeer in the lower right portion of the slide. So in the state of Florida, as I said, we have a very large monitoring program, and this will give you an idea of just how large that program really is. In 2019, it was estimated that we have over 300 rooftops that are suitable for beach nesting birds. And so suitable means that they are flat gravel rooftops that have been used by one of those 6 species at one point in time since we've started monitoring. The light green dots are the rooftops that we currently monitor, and the dark green dots are ground nesting birds. So as you can see, there's quite a bit amount of rooftops in areas even where there are beach nesting birds. The 2 circles that I have here in red are the regions that Audubon Florida oversees. So other parts of the state, especially on the east, is monitored primarily by the state and then other organizations with our partnership like the Florida Shorebird Alliance. But Audubon is primarily responsible for the regions in the circles. And as you all know, Bay County is in the northwest part of the Panhandle, and that's what we're going to be focusing on today. So to wrap your minds around why birds are nesting on these gravel rooftops to begin with, it's important to realize that there are threats to beach nesting birds. And since these birds are beach nesters, these things do apply to them. And a lot of the threats that these birds face are actually in part to the cause of why they're nesting on rooftops. So there's a large variety of threats and concerns that they face. But generally, they can be categorized into 2. Majorly, it's the loss of habitat and then increased nesting pressures. So things like increased development, we constantly, I'm sure if anyone's been here for a long enough time, you've seen the increase in development has skyrocketed. We also have issues of erosion and sea level rise. So the fact that a lot of their preferred nesting habitat is just being lost to those is a big issue. But then we have nesting pressures, primarily human disturbance and predation. And so as development is increasing and as tourism is increasing, we have more increased human disturbances. And then also with things like climate change and the increase of tropical storms, creating overwash, all of these things combined are exceptionally difficult for these birds to survive. And so for these reasons, maybe not one specifically, but all combined, they are now choosing elevated artificial nesting habitats. So the rooftops provide an open area for nesting. And so these birds will use these areas because they provide a nesting habitat. So this rooftop acts as an artificial habitat, and it is primarily because it gives it an open space and then also a substrate to put their nest in. And so these birds don't actually build nests like many of our songbirds do that we're familiar with. Very commonly, we see here Carolina wrens that are constantly building little nests around our homes, sometimes in our doorways. These birds don't do those types of things. They actually just make a little depression around where they lay their eggs. So that's called a nest cup. And so this is a picture of a regular beach that you would see here within the Panhandle. And then on the right is a gravel rooftop. And as you can see, both of these look very, very similar to each other. One of the most frequent questions I get asked is that is if rooftops are a good substitute for natural beachfront habitat. And I want to point out that there is never a good substitute for a natural ecosystem and natural habitat. But there are a lot of pros and cons to rooftop nesting in general. So some of the pros include there's less human disturbance. I've put a little mark here because that's something we're still trying to observe more and get a better grip on. But generally, you know, when you see around the holidays, especially major holidays like Memorial Day, the birds on rooftops don't have nearly as many human disturbances on rooftops. You know, not everyone's going to hang out on a rooftop for Memorial Day. So there's far less mammalian predation as well. So, you know, coyotes, raccoons, things of that nature, we don't really see that terribly much, if at all. And there's no overwash from storm surge. So if you remember last year, we had a lot of heavy rains later on in the season, and there were a lot of colonies that did not fare very well on the beach fronts, but luckily a lot of our rooftops that were active did fairly well. But some of the cons for nesting on rooftops in general are that you know, it's an elevated habitat, and so these birds aren't used to nesting on areas with edges, and so the chicks can fall. They run off the roof if they're trying to get away from a predator or scared. We do have poorly drained roofs, so it's not technically overwash, but if the rooftop itself gutters or isn't as maintained, sometimes it can collect a lot of water, and that can cool the eggs off and make them inviable. Sometimes we have really far inland rooftops, and they can be really far away from foraging areas. So these birds eat primarily fish, and they've been known to fly up to several miles just to get a fish to come back and to feed their chicks. And so that can be really taxing on the birds' overall energy and resources. And then sometimes, you know, it's just the rooftop itself. The gravel isn't ideal, or perhaps, you know, the AC units are breaking frequently, so there's more human disturbances. There's a lot of factors that go into the cons, and it's all a little bit different depending on which rooftop we're looking at. So Audubon helps support rooftop nesters in a variety of ways. Traditionally, you know, we monitor them to just overall keep track of their population estimates. So as I mentioned before, they are state threatened. So one of our goals in partnership with the state and other organizations is to help increase their population so they are no longer state threatened. So we try to protect these rooftop nesting areas and to reduce whatever the threats are to those rooftops. We then monitor the rooftops. You know, generally I'm out once or twice a week to each rooftop, depending on its need, to make sure everything's running smoothly and the colony's doing well. But then we also train volunteers to adopt a rooftop. So if anyone is interested in getting trained and getting being a part of our volunteer monitoring program, we can totally talk about that later. But then also during the breeding season and then the non-breeding season, we do outreach to the public and to rooftop affiliated companies. So this includes, you know, roofers, or HVAC companies, things of that nature. We try to give them some education materials so they know what they're getting into or what they might possibly see or encounter when they're doing their job. And then the last but not least, we try to implement different techniques for monitoring these rooftops. So sometimes we use cameras. We have vantage points, which are areas that look down on our rooftop so we can get a better visual of the birds. A lot of creative ways that we really try to better get a look at and understand what's going on with these colonies. So protecting rooftops with chick protective fencing is one of the first things that we do before the birds even get here. And this is because chicks falling off the roof is one of the biggest threats that they face. So what we do is we work with private landowners and businesses to install this temporary protective fencing. It's just a hardwire cloth that's folded and then weighted down with bricks. And so this helps create an edge so the birds don't then run off the edge of the rooftop or fall into the gutter. In other cases where, you know, we may not be allowed to put fencing, or maybe the fencing isn't needed, but we just have a couple exposed drains, We'll then put drain covers, sometimes at the bottom of the drain onto the parking lot. So the birds, if they do get washed down, they aren't just running around in the parking lot. We can find them more easily. And all of this helps protect the birds so they can still be taken care of by their parents. So these birds, when they're hatched, they can't forage yet on their own because they're fish eaters and they can't fly yet. So we have to keep them on the roof close to the colony and close to their parents so they can still be provided for. And then since rooftops, unlike beaches, don't typically have a lot of shaded areas, we also make chick shelters, mostly out of reconstructed pallets. But we have a couple other creative ways of doing it as well. And in some cases, we will put those on rooftops, and that helps provide shade so the birds can, find a place on the rooftop that's not too hot and get out of the sun. But also, if there is a presence of a predator, they can, find a place to hide and get away. Monitoring rooftops is fairly easy if you do want to get involved. We do surveys, like I said, all the way from Pensacola to Panama City. But if you are interested, we do have rooftops in Bay County, and I can set you up with a rooftop for you to adopt. To get involved, the surveys are a minimum of 15 minutes once a week. If your rooftop does become active, you may be asked to go out more frequently if you can, but if not, just checking on it once a week is plenty of help in itself. And even if you don't know anything about birds or coastal birds and their natural history, that's absolutely fine. We're happy to teach you anything that you need to know, and it's fairly easy to monitor for these birds. So they are colony nesters, so they do typically nest in large numbers. And so once you see a rooftop that's active, it's very easy to know and easy to identify. And the easiest way is to see that the birds will flush. So that's when something occurs and the colony is startled and they all flush up into the air at one time. And that's when we try to get a rough estimate of how many birds are on the roof. Once we've done that, we record our data and enter it into the Florida Shorebird database. And that's a state database that we all within Florida enter our data into, and we share it with others who are interested. And then last, we also look for any signs of additional nesting. So sometimes you might find eggshell fragments. Sometimes you might hear the birds or see them flying to foraging areas. It really depends, depending on your site, to keep track of what the birds are doing. But if you are interested in getting involved, our surveys have already started, but they do go throughout August. So the birds are here and nesting between mid-April to late July. And so we do our surveys from March to August to really get a picture of the full scope of their breeding. One of the things that I do for monitoring rooftops is working closely with landowners to try to get better pictures of colonies and what's going on with them. So as I mentioned before, with our ground surveys, you never have to go on a roof. You never have to climb a ladder. All of those surveys are done just via ground and getting flush counts. But in some cases, we're actually able to work with sites and get some different types of visual data. And that's primarily with the use of cameras. And so we have a couple of different styles that we use. We have video recording systems, a DVR. More recently, this is a picture of an NVR system that I just got and put up last week. But then we also have cell cams, which are like game cameras where we can, with employees from the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, we can go in and put these cameras closer to colonies and get better visuals that way. And here's just a short list of some of the sites that are allowing us to use some camera footage. So it really depends on the rooftop itself, the camera system that's needed or would best be used for that particular site to fill in some of our data gaps. And, sometimes, people are more than happy for us to have a camera, but we just can't put a video system there for, whatever the reasons are. So it really does depend, but we do have a really good list of people who are trying to help us here in the Panhandle with supporting the birds. I'm going to play for you a video. Now this is a video that was taken in 2019 in Panama City Beach. And this is just some of the data that we were able to collect with some of the video usage. Did everybody see that pretty well? So this is a site in Panama City Beach where there are nest boxes on a rooftop, and I'll talk about nest boxes in a bit. But these cameras were put there because we didn't really know what was going on with this colony, if they were using these nest boxes or not. And thankfully, Surfside Middle School was kind enough to let us put these cameras up. And even though the results weren't great, we weren't happy to see that we had some predator issues. It was really great information to see because now we know some of the problems that we're facing and some of the things that we have to do to help these birds be more successful. We also do some monitoring with banding, and this isn't something we really do in the Panhandle, but has been down in South Florida. And I want to touch base on it a little bit so you are aware of it. There are some birds that were hatched on rooftops and fledged, and then later have come back to actually nest on natural beach areas. So rooftops actually do produce members of the breeding population, which is a really great thing to see. It's very important when trying to increase their overall population. So sometimes, we do have chicks that fall off a roof, and if you do become a rooftop monitor, you will then automatically become a rooftop chick checker. Luckily for us in the Panhandle, this will be my third breeding season here, but in the past 2 years, we've only ever had 2 chicks fall off a roof. So that's really great. So hopefully this isn't something you will have to do, but it's a really awesome thing that Audubon has come up with to do. So if a chick falls off the roof, obviously you have to first catch it, and then you can keep it in a box. But then we also have what's called a Chickaboom. And this is an extension rod with a milk carton, and it has a little trap door. So here you can see this lady, she's got her milk carton and the chick is inside like this. And so this door here actually has a little magnet. So when she puts the pole up to the side of the roof, and then she puts the box over the roof, she can then twist the extension pole so the chick falls out, unscathed, and we don't have to actually go up on the roof and disturb the rest of the colony. Especially for rooftops that, we can't put fencing up. One of the last things we want to do is put a fallen chick on the rooftop and scare all of the other chicks, because we might just have, a continuum of chicks falling off the roof at that point. So this is a really great method for being able to put a chick on the roof without disturbing the colony. Another question I get asked frequently, which is one of my biggest concerns and a concern for many other biologists, is where will these birds go when there are no more gravel rooftops? And so we already know that these birds are nesting on gravel rooftops because they obviously are preferring these areas before their own natural habitat, or because those habitat areas aren't suitable. So this is a really big issue for us, not just in the state of Florida, but in the Panhandle itself. This is a list of all of the rooftops and locations that we have currently here in the Panhandle. Right now we have about 40. We've lost actually a couple this year, so I have to redo the list numbers, but we have at least 10 in Bay County, 3 in Walton, and 12 in Okaloosa, and about 10 or 11 in Santa Rosa now. But just a few years ago, in 2017, we had almost 60. And so rooftops are being replaced fairly quickly for a multiple of reasons. But it is a really big concern and question for how are we going to increase this bird's population if we're continuously losing both natural habitat and now artificial habitat. So why are gravel rooftops disappearing? Well, primarily it's done to re-roofing. And this is, roofs need to be replaced. Anybody who owns a home or has a structure knows that, no rooftop is going to last you forever. So gravel was thought to be an outdated way of roofing flat rooftops. Some companies still do install gravel, but a lot of companies and landowners are switching to membrane primarily because it's less costly. There's some mixed results with this, but generally it seems that they don't seem to last nearly as long, but they are a quicker fix and, help save people some money in the short run. But one of the biggest concern is that there's less liability to landowners in general. So for example, we have some rooftops in schools that are being replaced, even though the rooftop itself doesn't really need to be replaced. And that's because in high winds or tropical storm events, you might have gravel kind of get blown off the roof, and that could be a liability if it were to hit someone or cause any type of damage to a vehicle or anything like that. And in general, the membrane seems to be a little bit more efficient. So they're easier to maintain. They're reflective, so they're good at keeping heat in or cool in and keeping heat out. But because membranes aren't suitable for nesting, they don't provide that substrate that birds need to put their eggs on and put their nests in. We consider these unsuitable, and this is the primary reason for why rooftops are being lost. So one of the things that Audubon Florida has been doing is trying to recreate rooftop availability. And as I mentioned with that video, we were able to install 4 nest boxes at a school in Panama City Beach. And we were also able to install cameras there in 2019 and get some really great data from that. Because this is a secured site and we can't have volunteers access it all the time because it's a school. It was really hard to get visuals from the ground, what was going on with these boxes and if birds were using them. So the cameras were able to confirm that at least pairs of birds nesting. We were able to get data on predation issues. So we had a great horned owl that was of great concern, and then a Cooper's hawk that was also concerned. Unfortunately, they did not nest last year in these boxes, but I'm hopeful that they will return again this year. We do see that from time to time. Some rooftops will be active some years and not, and it will go back and forth. But we're hopeful that we'll once again get some more data on these boxes. We don't install a great many of nest boxes, and that's for a variety of reasons. I would like to have more boxes out there and get more data, but a lot of it is, solely on the landowner, whether or not that's something we can do. So this is all private land that we're working on. And so we have to get them on board to support these birds. But a lot of the times too, there's other issues as well. So nest boxes have to be approved by insurance companies. So it doesn't void any type of warranty to their rooftop structure or to their insurance of their building. So things like that, all play a role. But then also they are a little costly sometimes to build. As you could imagine, gravel is heavy and it's expensive, and you have to get that on the roof. So depending on how many boxes you want to put up and what the total square foot of gravel available or that is available, you're looking at a pretty penny. So it really does depend on the need, on the landowners working with us, and then also if we can do it at all with with their insurance. But it really does depend on individual support for the birds. We do have some sites right now that look like they are interested, but it's a really hard thing to start implementing. One of the ways that you can get involved if you'd like to try to help support rooftop nesters, and even if you can't adopt a rooftop, we have people who come out and help us install chick fencing. Most of this is already done for this season, but come the end of the season, we will then have to remove all of that fencing and get it back in my storage unit. We also have some sites that are on my radar for sites that are potential. I'm calling them my experimental sites. So they're gravel rooftops, but we don't have any knowledge of birds nesting on those sites at all. Most of those sites are in Gulf Breeze, but there might be a few in Bay County that that you guys could help keep an eye on. We have chick shelters, as I mentioned, and then also I've got a ton of decoys that need to be sanded and painted. These are wooden figures that look like the birds. And since they're colony nesters and like to nest, with other individuals, we can put these on beaches and on rooftops to try to encourage nesting. And then if you still want to just try to find something where you can stay at home, you can help out with data entry. We've got a rooftop nesting seabirds page on Facebook that you could make posts to and try to help manage with us. So there's really a lot of different ways that you can get involved. And if the rooftop nesting isn't totally up your alley and you are really wanting to do something more in their natural habitat and get involved, with coastal stewarding, my program coordinator, she actually oversees from Pensacola all the way to Panama City, down in Fort Walton Beach, City Beach, and things like that. You can get involved with helping protect beach nesting colonies there if you want to be a beach steward. So here's a list of some of the upcoming volunteer opportunities that I have. All of these I just mentioned, but you can get involved with several of these. And then last, this is my contact information. So if you would like to get involved with monitoring a rooftop, or if you have any other questions, you can email me directly. And if you would like to get involved with the coastal stewarding, you can also email my direct supervisor, Caroline Stahala. She does oversee beaches in Panama City and Panama City Beach, and now even some areas more towards Apalachicola. So for those who are a little bit spread out, I know Bay County does tend to be pretty spread out sometimes. There's definitely a lot of areas where you can get involved and help. And that is it. So thank you everyone for letting me come, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that we have right now.
It helps when I unmute. How many are typically in a colony on average?
Yeah, well, that really does depend. It depends on the rooftop size, obviously. Mm-hmm. I have colonies, on average, they tend to be about 20 to 40 individuals, but we have had some colonies with over 300 birds. Yeah.
It's a big group.
it's a really large group. And then I had one colony last year where I only ever saw one bird. But it was incubating. So there was, hopefully another bird. There had to be another bird at one point, right? Mm-hmm. So it really does depend. It depends on the rooftop size, and it just depends on how many birds tend to go to that roof. But it varies a lot. On average, about 20 to 40 on a rooftop if it's active.
And we're getting a lot of excellence and thank you. So not a whole lot of questions because you've done such a fantastic job. Any last questions before? And I was just curious how you got interested in working with these specific species of birds.
Yeah, that's a nice question. So I'm originally from Pennsylvania. And so I never worked with coastal birds. But up until 2018, I got a seasonal job with Audubon, Louisiana. And for some reason, I thought that I would be a good fit, even though I'd never worked with these birds before. And so I worked with Least Terns and Wilson's plovers there for a whole summer. And I absolutely fell in love with Least Terns. So that was the summer of 2018. And then later on that winter, this job was posted and available. And a friend of mine encouraged me to go for it because she knew how much I miss the Least Terns and love them. So that's why I'm here.
That's awesome. Yeah, they're pretty cute as chicks with their little fuzzy butts.
They're adorable. They make the most endearing squeaks. I mean, I just absolutely love them. So yeah, when you see them, it's love at first sight, really. You know.
I think you did such a good job, so we don't have too many questions.
That's great. Well, if anybody wants to email me, feel free to email me. And, we're on Facebook as well. You can check out, just Google Audubon, Florida. We've got a lot of different ways that you can get involved. Even outside of the coastal program, we've got Eagle Watch. And also if you're interested in bird watching, there's a really great Audubon Society called Bay County Audubon Society. They do a lot of bird walks and really great bird watchers and knowledgeable people. And they would be happy to get you started and point you in the right direction. So if you want to get involved in other ways, that would be a really great group to go to as well. Thank you. It was good to be here.
Have a good afternoon.
You too. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.